We're here to talk to Simon Kennedy. Simon is a screenwriter. He's also a YouTuber. But here's another fact that you may not know about Simon. Well, here he is. And Simon is also a physiotherapist. There we go. Welcome, Simon. Welcome to Story Conversations, our very first one. What came first? Were you always a screenwriter, who dreamt of being a physiotherapist, or a physiotherapist who fancied a career as a YouTuber?
Well, I started out as a physio, but then very quickly went part-time, and I was doing some youth work. And I remember one Friday night talking to the guys in the youth group and saying, just asking them what do they want to do with their life. And I realized I didn't want to be either a physio or a youth worker. And I wanted to be in a band. So I followed that through, and I was professional muso for 7 years while also doing physio because music didn't pay all the bills. So I stuck with physio. I've been very grateful for physio over the years. I was also a worship pastor in a church. So I was playing in pubs and clubs on Fridays and Saturdays, and for weddings and corporate events. And then I'd play in church on Sundays. 2013 Songs with Simon launched, and we've done 29 videos, and just about a month ago, we went past 1 million subscribers.
I know, and you've given away my big reveal. Oh, well.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. I'm just kidding. We're going to come into more about YouTube in a second, but I actually want to start, if that's all right, with Safe Harbor, which, of course, is a TV program that you created. Safe Harbor was actually your first big break, if you like, that got you screen credits. How did you get this first break? What was the process?
Well, I started writing for screen in 2011. The year before that, I won a national short story competition. So I had an idea that I could write, but then I discovered I had no idea how to write for screen. So I ended up getting a mentorship for 18 months and wrote my first. I wrote a feature film, and it involved a shape-shifting alien who was trying to get to Australia. I didn't necessarily want to do that, but part of the mentorship, we had to write something that was sci-fi or like really high concept. And I realized after that, thematically, because I've been challenged by Australia's asylum seeker policy and how we've been keeping people out of Australia. And I realized I'd written exactly the opposite thematically to what I actually believed. Because there were these in the movie that I'd written, we were trying to keep this alien out. Well, anyway, I guess I go right back to 2011 because it took 5 years of developing my own ability and craft. And so I came up with this concept of Australians just sailing off the Northern Territory, coming across an asylum seeker boat. And I felt like that on the Australian boat, we could have a whole heap of different viewpoints, hoping to represent Australia. And then they have a debate. What are we going to do about this boat? Because it's more in your face in that setting, instead of us in, like me in Brisbane, for example, going, oh, well, that's happening like 2,000 kilometers away. It doesn't really affect me. It's like if you place yourself in a visceral kind of situation, then the question is, well, what do you do? And some of the excuses that we have can be peeled away, and some might be really valid because it's a complicated area. But that's where having those different voices and having that debate, that was the idea.
Let's go back just for a moment, because I do want us to focus on the purpose behind the story. And I love what you just shared there about the fact that this sort of original idea came from this sort of sci-fi concept, if you like. But I want us to look at, obviously it's a psychological thriller set in Brisbane and set around a group of friends who are on a sailing holiday to Indonesia. But there was something particularly going on here in Australia during that time. Obviously during, 2018 when it was broadcasted here. And so I think it spoke well in the context of the time here locally. Who is the audience for Safe Harbor, and what were you hoping that Safe Harbor would add to this conversation that was already going on at the time?
Well, I do like documentary, but sometimes agenda-driven documentary can be preaching to the choir. So in Safe Harbor, I didn't want to make a documentary so much as I wanted to make a story that would bring the issues to the front and center, but not necessarily preach. It leaves you to make your own mind, and so the idea was every viewpoint is valid or respected, I suppose. Um, yeah, and it's to create awareness and conversation rather than um, shove down your throat, the audience's throat. This is what you should be thinking.
Mm.
And the director, like at the premiere screening, he said we set out to make a human story, and that's the idea. It's not to try and judge Australians for their viewpoints or to say that all asylum seekers are pure and innocent, and because we're all human, and therefore we all have our frailties and foibles and weaknesses, and if we were thrust into situations like that, well, we don't necessarily know how we're going to react.
Mm.
And a lot of people coming from who are seeking asylum, they've had so much trauma in their life. Um, so the idea was, yeah, it was to get people talking, I suppose.
What kind of events do you go to? What kind of people are you mixing with so that you can actually, get your stories in front of people?
Well, I think there's two things there. One is to have things that are worth pitching.
Mm.
Um, and so, that's why I went right back to 2011. It took me 5 years before I even started going to events. Uh, and then when I talk about events, you can subscribe to Screen Queensland, or well, I'm in Queensland, so your state screen agency,
Yeah.
or Screen Australia, the Australian Writers Guild, Inside Film, Film Inc. Yeah, so Inside Film is more industry based. Screen Producers Association. There's so many. That's in Australia, and you can go internationally as well. Sundance has free networking um, and courses. So there's once you start scratching, there's pretty much no end to how many podcasts and things you can sign up to, or just emails. And then pre-COVID, well, I just went along and started meeting people, uh, having something that so elevator pitches, and it's similar with in the business world, I'm sure. Just being able to express an idea in the time it would take to go up or down an elevator. You just happen to bump into someone, and then they go, "Oh, who are you? What are you working on?" You can say it, and it gets them interested. Then you can have more of a conversation.
How does the platform and structure of the story affect the way you tell a story, if you like? How does essentially how the platform that you're producing the content for, having an awareness of that, whether it's a theatrical or whether it's a television drama or whether it's going to be a YouTube series, how does knowing the platform affect the way that you structure and tell a story?
It's often to do with the size of the story. Um, so if you think that there's going to be a resolution, then you'll be looking at feature film, or it could even be short film, depending. Like uh, and that can be just as effective. Um, but if you're looking at a big audience and you often, but a big budget as well, that's feature film. Because of the resolution. And early on, someone said it's because of the human bladder that it tends to be around 2 hours. Uh,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
because most people can't sit for anyway. I think it also has to do with early films and the number of reels they had to put together. Um, but but with TV, that has changed in recent years. Go back 10 years or before that, and a lot of TV was episodic, um, and really you didn't want the characters to change too much. You design the characters so that um, they stayed the same and people fell in love with them, and then you drop different situations in and see how those characters you love react. And that was what the audience fell in love with. But then, especially with binging, and it's changed such that a lot of TV now is like novels on screen in a way. You have so much more time and space to develop those characters. So go to broadcast when there was the advertising imperative, I suppose, and you'd structure it based around ad breaks because you wanted people to come back after the ad break. So that's why there were the cliffhangers or the reveals right before, and everyone's going, "Oh, what's going to happen?" So you got to, yeah, you got to hook your audience back in, and then you want the really big one to be at the end of the episode, so that they'll watch next week. With streaming, you still need those moments throughout, but it isn't necessarily based around an ad. It definitely, with binging, you want a big moment at the end of every episode, so that they just go, oh, I've just got to, I can't go to bed yet. I've got to watch the next one. So there's still that imperative, but the structure is depends. I've got a friend who is challenging. He's writing a book at the moment that's challenging the three-act structure, and I think he's got a lot of points because the three-act structure is generally based on mythic storytelling. So it's you've got an ordinary world, and you've. Do you want to go into that?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so you have an ordinary world, and the main character, doesn't realize that they're going to die, or they already are dead in one sense. And in that could be metaphoric in that their dreams are dead. They're not necessarily literally going to die, but there's nothing that they're going to miss out on the fullness of life. And then an inciting incident, catalyst comes along and says, "Hey, you should try this. You need to do this." And sometimes it is life or death, but it's not always. It could be emotional life or death. And usually, it's really important for the main character to say no, because if they say yes straight away, then it minimizes how important to them the ordinary world is. As in, if they go, "Sure, I'll go there," then the ordinary world wasn't that important. So the ordinary world needs to be really important to them, but it's not all that they're meant to be doing. So the inciting incident calls them to adventure, and the second act is when they say, "Yeah, okay." They should, if it's an active protagonist, they should make a choice and go, "Yeah." So this is Luke Skywalker saying, "Yeah, I'll go with you to Alderaan," or it's Neo in the Matrix taking, I think, the blue pill
Yeah.
or the red one, whichever one it is.
Yeah, the red one was a different story.
Yeah, and then they go into the second act. Good and bad stuff happens. Generally, the midpoint is going to be a catastrophic thing. The mentor might die, like Obi-Wan, or Alderaan gets blown up. Talk about spoilers there, but it's terrible.
Yeah.
And then all is lost. Things go really bad, and that generally the mentor has to die or be pushed aside so that then the protagonist can step up on their own and take what they've discovered in Act Two back home often, to then challenge and face the climax, to challenge the thing that pushed them out in the first place, challenge their greatest fear, overcome it. Yeah, there's a very, very brief summary. So there's still elements of that in TV, in the long form TV. It just has more space to breathe, and there's more, therefore, chance to think about character. So Breaking Bad, for example, there's I think season 4 or fairly late. You know the main character so well that they had a whole episode where he is chasing a fly, like he's trapped, kind of trapped, and he's chasing a fly, and you think, how can you make an hour of TV out of that? And yet they do it so well. It's like a really memorable episode, despite that. Because it's so much about the character and the journey he's been through so far, and where he still has to go.
Songs with Simon is, as we said, it's just achieved over 1 million subscribers. But some of the content, in fact, I think you've reached over 500 million views in total.
Well, not quite.
Almost.
It's close.
It's close as, look, it's so close. I'd go for it. I'd just claim it. I'm a marketer. We always kind of lift things up a bit, but
just round up. Yeah.
Round up, don't round down. That's right. But you have had, I think, Old MacDonald Had a Farm, I should say, which, by the way, is kind of a fun play on the song. Even adults might enjoy it. 192 million views. I mean, okay, I know having young kids, they do tend to watch the same thing over and over, and they enjoy that. They seem to enjoy it, which is great. And I'm not surprised. Your content is fun, it's colourful, it's short, it's lively, and it's definitely worthy of the 1 million+ subscribers that you have. So congratulations. While you're just basking in that glory of my sort of promoting the Songs with Simon goodness, I might as well just give it a plug here by switching over to the and showing the YouTube channel. Here it is, and we can see here we got Songs with Simon. This is your nice little intro video. We might as well give that a play.
Hi, my name's Simon, and my name's Simon, and you're watching Songs with Simon. Here at Songs.
So we talked about this before. We'll just go and have a look what else there is. We got lots of other songs, but you'll see that we've got you've got 6.6 million views here for Bingo. Just lots of really great views here. 5.5 million, 57 million here, which is great. Let's go and have a look at videos and sort by the most popular. And there's Old MacDonald Had a Farm. And let's go ahead and have a look at that.
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on that farm he had a dog, E-I-E-I-O. With a here and a there, there, everywhere. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O.
So there we go. A little bit of a sneak peek there of the Songs with Simon YouTube channel, which of course you can all head over to, but not yet because we haven't finished our conversation. We're still chatting with Simon Kennedy. So let's talk a little bit about YouTube and let's understand, because this is quite different to drama.
Yep.
And I did ask you right at the beginning whether, what came first. And I noticed that obviously a lot of the content here, you haven't, I think the last video you uploaded was about 3 years ago. And in total you have, 29 videos, I think it is. On YouTube.
And only about 20 of them are songs.
Okay.
About 9 of them I was trying to talk to the audience, but none of them talk back. It's funny because, they were all 6-year-olds or under, and they were generally on their parents' accounts. And so when I did get comments, it was often in gobbledygook, like they just had mashed on the keyboard. So I tried, but it just, and now that I'm a parent, I understand. Often we would give our kids a tablet to watch YouTube for 15 minutes or while we hung out the washing or did a couple of jobs. And then we take it back off them. So it was a bit different to, just the way it was used. I don't think our kids even knew how to access the keyboard on the tablet, let alone when they were at that age, let alone make comments or learn how to subscribe. Talking to the audience just didn't seem to work.
Yeah. Well, I did notice that in one of the videos you had a bit of a you tried to steer people to your website to download a mask, I think it was, from one of the characters, and invite them to post their own videos. How did that go?
To my knowledge, no one downloaded anything. It's still got, I think it's got 20,000 views or something.
Yeah, I mean the video itself's doing really, really well. So but as I said earlier on, it kind of doesn't break the rules so much, but it just sort of, it's a bit of a, when I look at a lot of successful YouTubers, they've got hundreds and hundreds of or even thousands of videos before they get anywhere near 1 million subscribers. They talk about the first, getting to the first 10,000 and then the next 50,000. These are milestones that take sometimes years to achieve. And in just under 4 years, you've achieved, well, just over 4 years with the total number of videos that you've got, you've achieved 1 million views, 1 million subscribers, almost 500 million views.
Yep.
And a remarkable achievement with just 29 videos. What do you think it is about the content? Or have you just paid Google a lot of money to try and get that?
Well, I can tell you the aim that I had, but I can't tell you whether that's what actually made the difference, because it's really hard to know. But my aim because I started having kids, and that was one of the reasons we thought about, it's just like the Wiggles. They were a rock band, and then they went to kids stuff. And I thought, well, let's have a go at this. We were getting tired of staying out till 2 a.m. in the band. So is there something beyond that? And when I was reading to my kids, there's books that you read to them, and I would want to read it again. As the parent, I thought this was funny, speaks to me as well as to them. And then there's other books which I have no interest at all. It's like, oh, bring that book back again. I still would read it to them because I'm a good dad, you know. But it was the same on YouTube. It was there was most YouTube stuff for kids is only for the kids, and I really like Pixar as that double, like you're aiming for the parents as well as the kids. And so that's what I was trying to do is do nursery rhymes, but in a way that parents would have at least raise a smile. It'd entertain them somewhat. So, and part of that was thinking, I think mistakenly at the start, the parents are going to be the ones who press the play button. Sure, there's some parents who do that, but often they leave the device with the kids, and then the kids just press whatever's the next colorful thing that they want to press. And after a while, the kids actually, I've seen it, they actually do learn what they want to watch.
Yeah. The first time we handed them a tablet, they kind of, we watch every single,
yeah, that's right.
Fingers are going. And after maybe 2 or 3 goes, we're like, no, I think they're good. And if it's anything like our household, we're like, okay, it's 5 o'clock, TV, YouTube time, they're fine. We'll let them loose while we kind of try and get dinner ready and that kind of thing.
And that's what COPPA, I don't know exactly what it stands for, but it's children's content. So YouTube had to change, at the end of 2019, they had to change partly European Union stuff. And so Songs with Simon had to say, and all these other kids channels, we are made for kids.
Yes.
So what that did, overnight, it halved the revenue, which is an interesting thing, because up until that point, the reason for it is YouTube had been targeting kids with ads. And that was the reason, we can't do that anymore. The downside to that is potentially you could be watching a kid's channel or kid's video, and the ad that pops up might be an M-rated video, like an M-rated movie, or it could be for anything now. Instead of, it's not great that it was all toys and other kids shows and targeted at kids, but the alternative isn't necessarily great either. So that's why YouTube has tried to push people onto YouTube Kids. But my understanding is most people still just use the main YouTube channel. Yeah. So our income halved overnight because we can't target kids anymore, and that's okay. But our views also increased. So it was good for one aspect and not so good for another. And I don't know whether that's a universal thing, whether by getting rid of all of those things that kids were watching that they shouldn't be watching, by making sure you're only watching made for kids stuff, well, maybe that benefited those things that were actually made for kids, and that was us. So
so I want to get back to some of the TV content in just a moment, but let's just to wrap up the YouTube piece of this conversation. Can you share, maybe without necessarily having to go into the financials, because I know that people will want to know, but how has your YouTube career, what's the connection between your YouTube career and your screenwriting career? How has one helped the other?
Uh, it's opened some doors. So I'm working with a couple of animation studios. On one's a spin-off from Songs with Simon, but another is just it's a standalone animation show. Um, but it also funds me. So yeah, we're getting about 1 million views a day at the moment, and that's not it. Surprisingly, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's enough that I don't have to apply to Screen Queensland or Screen Australia for money to develop the TV stuff and the movies that I'm working on. So it's freed me up. It's amazing. I feel very blessed.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, congratulations again. And let's just switch gears. And what I'm going to do is we talk now a little bit about some of the projects that you're working on. I also just want to mention that we have just in case anybody isn't aware of this already, we do have this stream going live on our webpage, which is storystrategist.com.au. And the page is conversations. And if you just head there, the reason I'm pointing you there is because this is actually where we are monitoring the questions that come in, the conversation. Now, this is also going to Facebook and it's going to YouTube as well. And you know, anybody that's engaging there, we love you too. But I can only really do one thing. Well, I'm doing more than one thing, but I can only do really two things reasonably well. One thing well, two things reasonably well, arguably. But anyway. You can make that decision later. But here we have a ticker running on the page, and what I have noticed is that it doesn't quite fit, so we'll just make it fit. But basically, yes, we have a ticker on the bottom here, reminding you of where you can go to check out our chat and contribute to questions that we might put up on screen here to engage with Simon. So, but if you don't have any questions, you just want to listen, that's fine too. But you know, just inviting you to get involved in the conversation if you feel so inclined to do so. Now, let's just talk a little bit about some of the things that you got coming up, because we've talked about drama and we've talked about YouTube. You know, two different planets, if you like, in terms of content or platforms, let's say. But they're very different sort of environments for people. Although a lot of people are engaging online for content. I know, you know, myself included, I'll probably almost certainly consume more content on YouTube than I do on any other platform. And I know that's, you know, quite common for many people now. But as we think about TV here, and I want to talk about documentary, because you've also been engaged in documentary, and for people that are interested in writing, that are developing stories, I'd like to know a little bit more about the process, the thinking behind, and how maybe documentary differs to the way that you tell story for say, drama. And just mention, obviously, that you recently, there was another show which was on SBS, Bowled Over. It's your first TV documentary. Actually, I think they call it a dragumentary, not trying to give it away too much, but it's available online, on Catch Up. You can watch it on SBS now if anybody wants to see that. It's a feature length documentary. And is it feature length?
60 minutes.
It's 60.
Yeah.
Which in YouTube world is feature length, really. It's
yeah.
You know, but so television, it's not really. It's a TV drama documentary. How did you end up getting involved in? Well, let's try and answer the question about documentary. Let's the bridge between documentary and drama. How different are they in terms of genres, categories, if you like, and how is your writing different and your research process different? Or is
it depends. If it's based on archival footage, well, generally you still want to create a story out of it. Doesn't matter, whether it's real life or made up life. You still want to get a story, and for that you often will want to find those characters that the audience will associate with themselves with, and want to go on the journey with them. So it's the writing process, though, I discovered was I had this outside impression that documentary was you discover an amazing situation and you just happen to have the cameras there, or you take the cameras hoping to discover a story. But to do so, like to make a documentary can cost $1 to $1.5 million. And so to have that money on the chance that there's going to be a story, no one's really willing to put that money into it. Or it's pretty rare. They've got to have a really good belief that there is going to be a great story here. So what tends to happen is a director or a producer, sometimes a writer, but often it's the other two, will see that they meet someone, they come across a story, and then they engage a writer to write what the story could be. So I therefore have found myself researching the people who might be in the documentary by what they've said before or having interviews with them, and then making up what they might say in the documentary, and putting it into a story. Like it, they start here and these kind of things happen, and they finish here. So giving them a story arc, and then weaving it all together, and we submit that to people who have money, and they go, "Oh yeah, we see that could make an interesting story, or like an interesting documentary." And then they might give the money to make the thing. And then it could be completely different. So as the writer, it's quite interesting to be putting words into real people's mouths, and kind of making a quasi version of that person, and a story, making up a story that hasn't happened yet. In some cases, sometimes it's archival, and so you're taking things that are on public record or aren't on public record, and that's possibly the point, and then weaving that into an engaging narrative, that people haven't put those pieces together in that way before. Like true crime is often that, but yeah.
So help me just to understand, and just briefly, just so everyone's aware, my plan was to try and wrap this in about an hour, but we're going to go just slightly longer because there's a couple of other things we want to talk about, but we won't go much longer. But just with that in mind, Simon, just thinking about, like you mentioned, sort of $1 million and a half to make a documentary. You kind of, let's assume you've got a sense that SBS are interested, or they may actually be a partner right early on in the piece. I'm not sure, but like that's a lot of money. Someone's got to actually give you the money to make it. You've got to make a living. They've also they don't just pay $1 million to, because they feel like they're really generous and they just love giving money away. They're obviously, there's a business behind the film and the documentary and the TV series that we watch, right? So is it, and obviously SBS, there is advertising there, but is it purely about recouping the bucks through advertising, or what kind of mechanisms are there for what's the business looking for? What that gets them to say yes, because that's essentially what you're looking for, so you can get the green light to make this thing. But what do you think it is what are they looking for? How do they know they're onto something here?
It depends on the distributor. So ABC is a bit different, in that they don't have a commercial imperative, which is one of the reasons why they get criticized by those who do have a commercial imperative. But SBS, often they're somewhere in the middle. So they have a charter, and you need to be very aware of their charter when you're pitching to SBS. But what they're often after is buzz. Like they're wanting to, so think Filthy Rich and Homeless, for example. They are trying to talk to those social issues. One of the things they're looking for is social cohesion, trying to draw different, disparate parts of society together. And so they're looking, or Go Back to Where You Came From was one of their most successful series. They're looking for those zeitgeisty kind of issues that no one else will touch, because they want to engage audiences and get people thinking about that. That's why Safe Harbor had a natural home on SBS.
And that's their brand.
Yeah, they're looking for, so one of their recent ones is Chinese immigrants in the gold rush. So so the gold rush might have been told before, but not from that perspective. So that's yeah.
Which is
Whereas
why
for
they were
others,
interested in Bowled Over is obviously a drag story about a group of people that well, it's an unusual story because it kind of shatters the illusion or your preconceived ideas of this
yes,
kind of bowling club where there'd be sort of retired people and they have an interest in this community of drag artists
yeah,
and so the story itself is and that sort of fits within the brand of what, like you just said, SBS are trying to possibly achieve is sort of connecting or shattering our illusions of the different types of makeups of our society that we live in,
yeah.
which I'd argue that they achieved that probably with that show.
Mm. Yeah, and for me as well, like I look to be challenged myself. And so with that, I was on a panel for Safe Harbor and I was on the panel with the director, well, future director of Bowl Over. And we just got chatting afterwards and hit it off. And just she invited me to write that treatment, like the document that was going to get the money to make the show. And I had very little to do with drag queens by that stage. And I was going, "Are you sure you want me to do this?" And she just said, "Yeah, I've got a feeling about, I think that would be good." And like, it was challenging, but also it was a beautiful story, and just two different communities who you normally wouldn't associate with each other, coming together and bringing something really positive in the way that they interacted.
I guess that I was going to ask. I mean, I just noticed that we got a question in actually, so we better use it. And the question was around how much do you think about audience and the platform, which is something we did sort of touch on a little bit, but you just said something there that was interesting because you in your research piece there. I mean, how much were you thinking about the audience, the types of people that would be, because this wasn't just written for the drag community, right? This is written for a much wider public space who might be interested.
Yeah,
But how much are you thinking about that audience when you're developing, and also obviously the platform, SBS, television, when you're actually developing and writing this story?
it is interesting because there are two considerations there. My client is the director, um, and so she had editorial say. We worked together on this document. And so the style of my writing, I've never written anything like that before. It still has me in there, but it sounds different to anything else that you might have read of mine. Um, yeah. So she's my client, and yet we're considering the audience as well. Well, her client is then SBS, and then SBS's client, to call it that, is the broader audience. So there's multiple layers. Um, so I guess what this Mandy is the director, Mandy Lake from Flick, and what I really admire about her is her ability to find the emotion within it and to craft, well, to find and then put them into stories, give it shape, find those emotional moments, and then to be there with the camera at those emotional moments. That's yeah, she has a real skill for that. So she just finds, I think, something universal. Um, it may be a different world to what you've seen before, and yet the emotions these people are going through, the insecurities they're facing, or the challenges, you're still able to relate to it. So
I know that you're working on other things because you've been telling me you're obviously, I know you're busy working on things. So maybe you can just share a little bit about what are the things that you're working on? What have you been doing during COVID? As COVID, the picture that we've all been told, or the story that we're hearing, is that COVID has been really difficult for television and for especially and for film globally. That may be different in Australia just because of the way that things have been here locally. But how have things been for you? What kind of things have you been doing during these past 12 months when we've been, isolating more? I'm sure writing is quite a solo experience anyway. But yeah, tell me a little bit about the kinds of things you have been working on recently.
Well, COVID meant there were fewer meetings and fewer events. So there were fewer distractions in one way, except for when the kids were home during lockdown. That was that was fairly distracting. But I had a great year writing. I wrote a couple of feature scripts, and they're sitting with a producer who's made 40 feature films. So that's really exciting. He knows how to get a film made. But unfortunately, they're set in Italy, partly. So, and Italy's not doing great yet. So that may not happen for another year or two. um, but yeah, a couple of TV shows. And it looks like we might have some American interest in one of them, which is really good. Partly because of the connections and the money that might open up, because making a TV show is very expensive. So even though it's set in Australia, it's great to have an American connection, because partly also because they see an international audience for this, even though it's an Australian show. And we very much have that as an idea, had that as an idea when we were developing it.
Yeah.
We want it to be quintessentially Australian, yet with universally enough that it would appeal throughout the world. So it's nice that someone else sees that as well.
So you believe that Australian stories do have international appeal? Because often we hear the opposite to that.
So it depends, but things are changing. Go back maybe 10 years ago and again before, when America wanted to buy an Australian show, they would often remake it. And that was because they were, believe it or not, they couldn't understand our accent. That was the main reason given. But now with streaming, so it's becoming a whole lot less frequent for that to happen. They just buy the show, and American audiences in particular are much more. They've just heard other accents so much more now, and they're open to shows that have subtitles. And America, it's just such a huge audience, and that's why it's so important.
Simon, actually, before you answer your question about podcasts and things that you're doing right now, where can people find more information about you? I know you got an entry on IMDb.
Yeah, I don't have any control over IMDb because I haven't got into IMDb Pro yet, so it's not quite up to date. But yeah, Facebook, I guess. I'm currently working on a website, just thinking about brand myself.
I know a good
there is a Songs with
company
Simon
that may be able to help you. We know.
Hey.
Yeah, just mentioning that, just in case.
Yeah.
Hit me up later and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, a lot of my work has just come through word of mouth.
Yep.
It's just because I'm starting to look at going into the States and UK, and talking with people who I haven't got organic contacts with. I kind of want to look professional, or have a professional backing, rather than just, hey, you know this guy, and yeah. So there's other elements to it.
So listen, I've got a tip here for you, because Heather, who's been following this conversation today, and I think she's still online, she wants to know whether you're going to go on tour with Songs with Simon. Now, that could be a good PR story for you.
Well, if it's Heather Munro, then I think she'd have to come on tour with me. We've performed together before.
Oh, there you go. Well done.
Yeah. There's lots of potential plans for it, but there are also, at the moment, screenwriting is the focus.
Yeah,
so,
of course. That's good. So podcasts, we've all been waiting for some tips. What should we be watching? What should we be listening to? Come on, help me, use up all that spare time that I've got.
Most of my challenge comes from my work, because I'm researching all the time. And so researching up-to-date technology for a project I'm working on yesterday, cutting-edge stuff that it doesn't quite exist yet. And just I'm thinking so hard all the time that in my downtime, I don't listen to anything that's really challenging. Lately, I've been listening to Charles Dickens, like just audiobooks, or Ray Bradbury, Chandler. So Ray Chandler, the pulp detective novels, or just to so that's listening.
Ultra modern thinking there. I like that. That's remain sharp, you know.
That's right.
Next you'll be creating a period drama or something. Do you fancy anything like that for your future kind of career?
Well, yeah, I one of the things is a period drama. So
there you go. Wow,
set in
stumbled across that one.
In Australia, but in around World War One. Yeah.
Excellent.
And one of the feature films from last year was a pre-World War II spy thriller. So so there you go. No, it's just like Agatha Christie, I think is one of the best writers for giving a visual representation of someone's character. So just in a couple of sentences, she sums someone up just by Miss Marple or Poirot looking at them, and you have a real sense of what their character is. So Agatha Christie and Charles Dickens did a similar thing, I think. He had a lot of skill in that. I confess that I didn't listen to all of I've forgotten it. Forgotten already.
Should have listened to the rest of it.
Yeah, that's right. David Copperfield.
Oh yes.
I got a bit tired of him relating what almost every meal was, and so just writing has changed. When I first started paying attention to writing, Twitter was just coming into its own, and so apparently the number of words in a sentence has decreased in the average sentence that's written. So it had come down 10 years ago to 17 words average in a sentence. And I heard someone just a couple of years ago say it's now 13 words in the average sentence. I did another interview recently, and the interviewer, when they wrote it up, every sentence was maybe 10 to 15 words long, and it was and I write fairly succinctly. I haven't I think about that, but it's just that the way that posts on Facebook and Twitter has changed the way the consumer reads, and therefore the way it snowballs on itself. So it's really interesting. We use adverbs so much less now, and adjectives. The rule is to try and find a noun or a verb that will communicate that. So instead of saying ran quickly, it's say he sprinted or dashed or darted, or so. There's something good in that, but there are instances where I think we potentially lose, and so we don't have the long-winded David Copperfields anymore, but we also lose some of the richness of that language. So
yeah. But I will just kind of draw this conversation to a close and say thank you to you, Simon, for giving us your time. And I hope that everyone has enjoyed our conversation. I hope it's been inspiring, helps you think a little bit about maybe how you can apply some of these things. You may not be a screenwriter or have any aspirations to having a YouTube channel or anything like that, but I think that these conversations are good and applicable across all sorts of different industries, I think, and ventures. That's our aim anyway with the conversations. We certainly hope you've enjoyed them.